That's
Just,
good.
just one. How are you, David?
Good. How are you, sir? Thank you for joining us.
You're welcome. It's 8:03 p.m. here, and we've had a kind of a non-global warming day. The high here today was 61, so kind of like a jacket day all day.
Yeah. It's I'm in Arizona, so you can just imagine where it's at here.
Yeah, well, it's a lot different there.
Yeah. Um. No, but I've always enjoyed the desert, so it's all good. I'm not a big fan of cold weather myself. um. We're kind of gonna give. We're gonna do a little intro, but we're kind of gonna give you the floor. It'll be you know what you
If
have
I
and
if I give you a background sketch, it would work better while we're talking through everything.
yeah, that's good.
Being born in Arkansas, you couldn't get elected in Arkansas for about 100 years if you were a Republican. So I had some very powerful people in my family, two county judges, and we also had the former chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee, Wilbur D. Mills. And when I decided, this was because of the Clintons. Clinton's first election was 78. He was sworn in 79. That I could immediately see what he and Hillary were really all about. I was a Southern conservative Democrat, and I watched them real close for about a year. And then I switched, as Reagan was running, I switched over to the Republican Party. I could see that the Democrats just wasn't where I wanted to be. They didn't really represent what I believed in. And Carter had appointed Hillary Clinton to what's called the Legal Services Corporation. She immediately started plundering those funds for political activism. She and another woman named Lonnie Lanier, this was in 1981, they launched what everybody called the crazy check scam, to where if your children were hyperactive, they wanted you to be diagnosed with ADD or ADHD and put you on Ritalin. My son was not hyperactive, he was just extremely brilliant. He's got probably a higher IQ than me. So I took my kid away from this type stuff and I switched to the Republican Party. As soon as I did, and being the step nephew of Wilbur D. Mills, immediately the Republican National Committee was like, damn, we just had a coup d'etat in Arkansas. And I worked with the RNC. They asked me 2 times to run for governor. I was a very successful architect, engineer, design build executive. And I finally told them, I said, I can't see any future in running against Clinton to take a $35,000 a year job, and I'm making over $400,000 a year running my company. So I passed. But the fact that my name was on the radar in Arkansas made me a political enemy. I mean, I got assaulted by judges, by friends of Bill, from every direction. So I finally decided I was going to move. I took an offer in 1989 to move to Washington, D.C. and help the RNC in what's called policy formation. So what is a true conservative? Because I'm a true conservative. And what we basically believe is defensive military. No nation would dare attack the USA. We believe in pulling the bottom up. We don't like poverty. We don't like homelessness. We think that's a national embarrassment. So I agreed to take a position on what they call the National Policy Forum. There was 25 people. Nationwide, they picked 25 people. I was one of them. And I answered to the RNC treasurer. I met with him for lunch 2 days a week, every Tuesday and Thursday. And the rest of the time I was focused on trying to figure out how the United States could come closer together instead of fractured like it is right now. I did not know that part of the National Policy Forum was being headed up by John Bolton, and he was the forebearer, the creator of PNAC. And we all know what PNAC wanted. PNAC wanted the war. They wanted the American supremacy in the 21st century. And I stayed for 2 more years after I found out what they were actually doing, because I wanted to identify as many of these people as I could. I knew they were on both sides of the aisle. I knew they were not conservatives. They were actually defectors from the DNC. When Haley Barbour wanted to win the House and Senate in '94, he let these people come over. People like Robert Kagan, Bill Kristol, Vicki Newell, names people in America love to hate now. They didn't understand back then that when they came over to RNC, it didn't mean they'd changed political parties or even ideologies. All they did was they came over there because Clinton would not be a war president. And I fought these people literally 94, 95, 96, because they were slowly but surely co-opting and taking over the entire conversation in America. But, what I want Americans to finally understand someday, neoconservatives are not conservatives. This is not new conservative ideology. This is Bolshevism, Trotskyism, communism. And they came over and they dressed themselves up and everybody bought it. But the reason they bought it is that the media has been there. They have been like the fascist front for what I call the Bolshevik background, which is the media. That's why somebody like Trump runs, they get absolutely eviscerated with bullshit. They don't want conservatism in America. They don't want the Christian nation to be strong. And right now, as everybody can tell, they would love to disarm America. Once they disarm America, they control the mightiest nation on earth. But I don't think it's going to be mightiest much longer. They have a mighty military. They have a mighty amount of debt. And lately, we've had a mighty amount of bullshit. But I don't know where the turning point is. After I came out and went public, 1993, my book came out. In 2004, 5, I did over 200 radio shows, 7 TV shows. And I even got approached by patriots. They thought this was the perfect time for a military coup or maybe Second Amendment option. And I said, no, it's not. I said it would be too costly because too few Americans will stand up with you. I even went to one meeting, was going to go to a meeting in Virginia, and this was literally what you call the far-right nutcases. These were super military, type patriots. I refused to go when I found out the FBI was going to be there. They had infiltrated that meeting. They wanted to know what I had to say about upending and overthrowing the U.S. government. I think the only way, I tried to run in 2005, 2006. And I told Americans, I said, you have to stand up and you have to take out the House in 2006 and 1/3 of the Senate. Get rid of everyone that you can get rid of. Then, when a new president comes in, he's got a clean, a somewhat clean chalkboard to work with. But until they deal with the issue of what traitors there are in Congress, it doesn't matter. Hillary could be in the White House, Trump could be in the White House. Nothing will get fixed. So I'm hoping this year, I think enough Americans have woke up. I think this year we could get Trump in, but I also am hoping that they will take out as many people as they can, like Paul Ryan, John McCain, and people like that are not our friends. They don't represent America. They represent their special elite. And that's what has to happen. Even if Trump gets elected in November and they don't flush Congress, it's going to be a hell of a battle still. He could spend, I'll tell you what my great uncle told me, or my step uncle. He said a U.S. president could come into the Oval Office and slash and burn on the U.S. budget for 4 years and not hit anything vital. And in 1968 Christmas, I'll never forget what he said. All the men were in the den, all the women were in the kitchen and dining room. And he said, American citizens that think they have well-intentioned bureaucrats and elected leaders that care how they spend and waste the U.S. taxpayer dollars are consummate fools. This is the guy that was the chairman of House Ways and Means. So that's why I finally decided to stand up and fight. It's got to change or America is finished. What I'm watching now from Europe is I'm watching what's happening in the world economic markets. So,
I've always been a huge proponent of global markets because I don't think it's changing anytime soon. I don't think you can go back to just the U.S. alone.
Well, you know what's interesting about global trade? The more we trade and the more we travel with other peoples, the less likely we are to kill each other. When I first moved to Europe, I dated a Russian for 4 years. And I learned some interesting things. Christianity was never dead. Not every Russian was a communist. And they actually do like America. It was just the Communist Party that hated America. But they didn't hate Americans. They hated the government. If you go and look at what Osama bin Laden said about 9/11, he doesn't hate the American people. He despised the state. So, somewhere here, the people have to figure out how to get the voice back. That's the problem. People don't have the voice.
Trade builds understanding among cultures. That's my understanding of it.
It really does. I've got a young girl coming on board with my company on October 1st. She is the best I have found yet that is fluent in Russian and English. She's from Uzbekistan. She's Muslim. But there's nothing about her that's fundamentalism, nothing radical. She dates a Christian man. She's not so wrapped up in Islam that she has to date some guy that's going to beat the hell out of her if she steps out of line. She dresses Western. But once you start looking at the rest of the world with open eyes and you don't listen to the propaganda, you see a totally different picture. I see David and I see Chris. Where'd Bree go?
She's running some errands around town, kid stuff.
Oh, okay.
I'm sure she'll be back shortly.
Yeah, how are you doing, Chris?
I'm doing good. How are you?
It's been a long day, but it's been a great day.
That's good.
I got my bank to approve the difference in how to do the financing.
Good. That's good to hear.
Well, you have to be careful. When you got the United States out there stalking everybody and trying to beat everybody up.
Yeah.
I had to go meet with them for 2 hours today and show them some documents, and then they finally decided, yes, we will do this. So my funding source is actually Armenian, but they live in the Western Hemisphere. And right now, that family and 5 other Armenian families are blocking the U.S. from doing a color revolution in Armenia. So they're on the American shit list, because they're political. It's not economic, it's political.
Yeah.
I've noticed, and maybe you have an opinion on this. I've noticed, especially amongst my generation, for the most part, I've always said I'm a constitutional conservative.
That's the right kind of conservative. But go ahead.
But among my generation, I get criticized heavily for being that. I think if you actually are a free thinker and you can think for yourself and make decisions for yourself, you see what the other side is trying to do. You're not gonna, but I think a lot of people, this is just my own opinion, I don't know if you agree, but I think a lot of people get so wrapped up in what the Liberal Party is trying to do, they don't see it for what it is.
I tend to agree with you. The DNC has done a good job because it had media help of trying to sell their agenda to America. Like, America's rich enough that we can be a socialist state. But hidden behind that is something that people don't see. And that is, most of these people are the same people who want to take away your free speech and your free thought. You can't dare criticize them, but they're allowed to criticize you. You know, they can call you a Nazi, a fascist, a pig, or whatever. But if you dare say anything back towards them, I mean, they gang up on you. They come out of the woodwork. That's what happened when I announced for president. The RNC thought, when they heard I was thinking, they thought maybe I would put my hat in the ring for the RNC, but I announced as third-party independent. I got attacked by both parties. Even though the RNC, even though the RNC knew that I was a major league conservative.
I saw something. I saw a panel actually on YouTube that you were on. I like what you said. You became a Republican to the Bill and Hillary Clinton, and you became an independent because of George Bush.
Yes, that was the third anniversary of 9/11.
Yep.
The what they call confronting the evidence. The producers of that sent out 16.5 million DVDs free of charge, free of shipping, all over the world. And after the first year, we heard that over 500 million people had seen that video.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I wish 3 billion had seen it, but we may have to reissue it.
I think the thing is, when people are confronted with the truth, and this goes for a lot, probably a majority of people, they get uncomfortable with the truth. They don't like hearing. They're perfectly content to live under a veil of basically dishonesty.
Yeah, and, well, Friedrich Nietzsche said the people don't want to hear the truth because it will destroy their illusions.
Yeah, and
a sentiment and a reality that is repeated amongst the common people the world over.
Exactly. Some people call it cognitive dissonance, but some people are just what I call head in sand. You know, nah. They don't want to hear the truth.
Yep. Oh yeah.
And,
absolutely.
Yeah, I tell you what, I like this new application. It's much better than Skype.
Yeah, Hangouts is excellent.
They the one thing I've noticed is that most Americans, especially since I'll talk about this especially since we're in an election season, most Americans will listen to only what the candidates are saying, but they won't actually go and look and see what they're actually saying, what it'll actually do in the real world.
Listen, that's a trend that started as early as Nixon back in 1973.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's like all of a sudden Americans thought they don't have a personal identity if they don't have an R or a D by their name. And it's a sickness. I mean, it's almost like, you know, why would you identify yourself to the rest of your friends in the world on who you voted for last time?
Unfortunately, since then, I haven't been old. I'll put it this way: the first time I was able to vote was in 2008 when Obama and McCain were running.
Okay.
Now, I didn't like Obama at the time, so I voted for McCain, thinking that was a better option. But I was 18, so you know, probably didn't know as much as I know now.
Well, I voted for McCain on what I call a Hail Mary pass.
Yeah, I did the same.
I wouldn't vote for Obama, but I will tell you this much, and I've heard this from a few of my friends who are also conservatives. They would take Obama over Hillary for a Democratic candidate right now. Not that either are great, but Hillary's is
why? Why though?
She's a disaster.
I mean, but why though? Because they're essentially one and the same.
Yeah. I guess Obama kind of appeals to the people that like bullshit and smoke blown up their ass.
Yeah.
Hillary's a little different. Hillary's a little different. She has done a great job as a Bolshevik marketing herself as a neocon defender of America. And I mean, she doesn't have a conservative bone in her body.
No.
Never has.
She's
There was
extremely liberal.
Yeah, well, past liberal. Um, there's a third attorney in Arkansas. His name is Cliff Jackson. He's retired now, but he went to Yale with the Clintons. And he is publicly on the record with a quote. He said, when we were at Yale together, Hillary was so far to the left that the left would not talk to her.
I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Democratic cross, where people try to blur up what watered down communism is by shifting it into categories like you have your center Democrats, your right-handed Democrat, your left-handed Democrat, and then you have center up, center down. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that term or not, but
Yes, I am. It's they have so many istonisms in there they don't even know who they are anymore.
exactly, yeah. It's this constant reinvention of terminology that has got, I think, people so turned around backwards, where you've got, it's kind of sad, because even just down to the way that they market themselves, and it's actually really, from a strategic point of view, it's pretty impressive. I mean, we do have to give it that, but even right down to the way they market themselves, they'll talk about past events, like if we look back in history at past socialists,
Right?
like if we look at, I hate to bring it up, but Adolf Hitler, for example, he was a well-known liberal socialist, and
Yes, he was.
and even just last night, I was watching an episode of World War II in color, and they're sitting there talking about him and making references to extreme right-wing socialism.
Yeah,
And that's what they do. They remarket themselves. They rebrand themselves every 2 to 3 years.
I've called them for years chameleons.
Yeah.
Just when you think you have them figured out, they do the chameleon thing and they change their marketing strategy because the other one wasn't working.
Yep.
One of the things I noticed about the DNC when I was leaving, the Clintons were having a weird influence on me. And I have two CIA friends. They're now retired. And both of them were involved back in the 60s and early 70s. They were involved in the creation of a lot of these istonisms. The CIA wanted that side of America to break into pieces, thinking that if they couldn't get their act together, they could never win an election. And this is back when America was definitely 2-1 conservative to liberal. It's still pretty close to that. But one of the things that's happened is a lot of the conservative people have checked out of the system.
Yeah.
They don't show up and vote anymore.
A lot of Americans are also fed up. I'll say this, I'm only voting in this election not because I'm a fan of the presidential election at all. I'm voting because, and I've said this a million times before, I'm voting because I care about my local elections, the things that directly impact where I live.
Right.
As far as the presidential election, I know how I'm going to vote, and it's not going to be for Hillary, I'll say that. But I honestly believe, if you look back at elections we've had, I think this is, if not the worst, one of the worst presidential elections we've had.
Yeah, but it's also one of the most important.
Yep.
Because we're at a huge turning point right now. And with the neocons, if the neocons stay in power And they have this Wolfowitz doctrine, that says that no regional or international power can be allowed to emerge to challenge U.S. supremacy. Hillary's mission was going to be to go in there and put Russia and China in their place. And I think the first two places she would challenge Russia is Crimea, which is going to be a war. And she would try to put a no-fly zone air cap over Syria. And that would wind up into a bigger war because Russia's not going to stand down. Russia is there legally, and everything that the United States is. I mean, that's just the bottom line.
Although we do have United Nations contracts that state that we do have to intervene in the event, which was the reason for the sanctions. But they do have a right to that port, and they need that port. I mean, that's really all there is to it. Strategically, from an economic standpoint, they need that port, plain and simple.
Yeah. Everyone criticizes Russia, but what Russia did, as Redemption just said, is they needed, as you said, they needed that port. And you were talking about Hillary going after China. Nobody who's smart will go after China like that because China can either uplift or destroy a lot of world markets.
They could dump the U.S. Treasury, and the U.S. would go into meltdown because when they dumped $700 billion, the only suckers on this planet that would take it was the ECB and EU. It has created a liquidity crunch from hell over here, just choking down U.S. debt that Russia and China got rid of. I have to deal with that every day over here.
Well, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the euro is so in flux, it's making businesses in Europe and even businesses who do just business with Europe, making them very insecure because they don't know what's happening.
Well, it's a combination of that, but it's also this continuation of Russia's sanctions, which are killing EU. They're not hurting the United States. They're really not hurting Russia. Russia's just moving right along. And who is suffering is EU has lost about $100 billion in trade. And that came out of people's pockets like us.
Would you say that Brexit also is playing a role in there?
No, actually, one of the biggest reasons people voted for Brexit was the EU membership fees, the annual payments they were having to make, and the effect of the sanctions were pushing UK under anyway. And they went through about 2 to 3 weeks of downside, but now their market is booming. People are coming back in there and they're doing business with them, in spite of, and they don't have to put up with the EU. With the EU, it's almost like dealing with the mafia. You got to figure out how much they're going to ask you, under the table for them. I've run into this everywhere except Switzerland and the Czech Republic. Other nations are just really eat up with this, what I call a dumbass way of doing business.
Yep.
Hey, you guys. I'm here now.
Welcome back, Bree.
How are you?
I'm doing good. Everybody, I think you've done an introduction with Karl, but I want to let y'all know that he's a personal friend of mine, and we're going to be doing several parts of this because there's a lot of information that needs to be told to the American public to understand what we are actually facing coming this election, because it's a make or break our country. And the Clintons are so corrupt that if we allow it again into the system, we're all doomed. Our children are doomed, everything else.
Kind of reminds me of the show House of Cards.
Yeah, it does to a degree. And by meeting Karl, I have to say he's been like a mentor to help me research more and want to actually learn more about the history of our country and everything that has happened in the last 30 years. So, as I just wanted to pop in and say that yes, this is just the beginning. I want to start trying to do these every day to get this story out because it is a long story. Um, Lots of
Unfortunately,
information.
unfortunately, it's a Stephen King horror story too.
Yeah, yes, it is. It's an American horror story, seriously. You
Yeah,
know, and a lot of people do not realize that they are puppets in this game that the Clintons have been playing along with the Bush administrations and everything for the last 30 years. You know,
and the CIA and the big bankers, big defense. They're all involved in this game.
yeah. So, like, I know David gave you the floor and, wanted to talk, so I don't know exactly where y'all were because I was running late with dropping the boys off at practice and everything, and then I had to turn around because one forgot their cleats in the car. So that's why I was late getting in. But I wanted to get that fully addressed to where people know exactly what's going on.
I used to
And
spend. I felt like I used to spend half of my professional career running four kids to sports practice and games.
exactly.
Yeah,
And right now, that's what football season's starting up. And in the South, Carl, we're all about football.
yeah.
And
Border wars.
yeah, exactly. And uh, we tomorrow's media day for him, and so we'll be doing that press conference, media day, and all that good stuff. But it's been crazy getting all things ready to get back to school. Scrimmage starts today and tomorrow, and then next week, and then season kicks off.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
uh,
the book I wrote, we sold 336,000 copies, and I've probably given away 10,000, like I did with you. Emailed it to you,
yes, yes.
but
And
that's a
it's a
very,
very interesting book.
it's a,
Everybody needs to pick up a copy of it.
it's a
Is
very
there a way
small.
we can put a link for it?
Um, we're getting ready to do our IT center here, and people can just
Uh-huh.
get a free copy of it.
Okay. If you
Get
want to do
people.
it that way.
I mean, I'm not looking to make any money off selling the book. It's already been out in the public domain now for 12 years, and everybody that's read it is a smarter American. But
Yes.
they didn't understand back at 9/11 how much the capital markets fraud and who was winning what election and where the money was coming from is interconnected between Washington D.C. and Wall Street capital markets fraud.
Yeah.
It's all connected, and it still is.
And
Um,
that's why Hillary has Wall Street backing her.
exactly. One of the trends I watched for years. I have actually sued the United States government under RICO, and they couldn't plead out. I perfected a way that they could not get out of a lawsuit with sovereign immunity because of the almighty federal government.
Yeah.
But
And what?
I've watched a trend since George Herbert Walker Bush of less and less and less RICO lawsuits. And
Yes.
RICO was intended to stop racketeering and mafia activity.
Yes, it was.
It took me 10 years to figure out why that was so. We now have the mafia owning Wall Street and owning big defense, owning big pharma. And those same people are turning around and donating to these clowns in Washington, D.C. It's like one of my tweets I made today. I said, most people, this used to be the seat of a great government. I said, now it's the biggest whorehouse in America.
I want to get your opinion on this since we're talking about the markets. I've always believed, and this is a belief I've held for a long time, and it's only been reinforced to me countless times. As far as markets go and trades go, I think the U.S. government specifically needs to get their nose out of it. I've always believed in letting the markets do what they do, letting businesses operate the way they need to.
Well, I totally agree, but what they've been doing, David, for about the last 15 years is they've been using what's called the Fed M3 funds offshore. And they're intentionally intervening into the markets to keep them propped up. Like right now, if you look at the deposit and capital ratios of U.S. banks, they're way undercapitalized. They say they're Basel III compliant, but the only thing that's keeping them afloat is every time their stock starts going down, every time Buffett or Soros or Paulson sells their big bank shares, the Fed steps in and buys them, so everybody thinks it's okay.
Yeah, and the problem I have a lot of times is, as I said, you have to let, the, on what you said, I think the reason they're propped up so much is because the U.S. is not at the top of the world trade markets.
No, they're not anymore.
And if we didn't keep the trade propped up, U.S. industry would fall with it. But that's how a true capitalist society has to work. Businesses need to step it up and say, well, you know, we can't compete. They need to say basically, how can we compete with specifically Japan and China in this arena?
Well, Germany, their competition remained pretty strong. They've been hurt by these Russian sanctions. The Germany model is probably what America needs to go back to. There was a time when the best products in the world were made in America. But right now, the best products in the world are made basically in like South Korea, Japan, Germany, Switzerland. You know, we kind of lost the competitive edge when we started farming everything out and trying to move to a consumer society, and then parallel with that, Washington D.C. policies were killing the consumer. Mm-hmm. I've had this argument with them for 30 years. I said,
who was the one that started sending our jobs out of the country?
It actually accelerated towards the end of George Herbert Walker Bush, and then it went on steroids under Clinton.
Exactly. That's my point I want to get across. Under the Clinton administration is when America is believing that the Clinton administration created so many jobs and it was the booming market. However, if you look back today and realize all of our industrial jobs, our steel jobs, our manufacturing jobs, all that was sent overseas, like AT&T, General Motors, different things like that. I know AT&T, prime example, my mother worked there for 20 years and was laid off because it was shipped to China under Bill Clinton. And because of that, people look back and they think that his administration was the one that was making all the money and all the jobs, when technically he was giving our jobs away. But what saved him was the internet boom coming up.
Yeah, but you know, they talk about the Clinton $1 trillion surplus, and I've given speeches about this. By the time you factor in the fraud that his administration allowed in the dot-coms and the telecoms, mm-hmm. and they crashed big time from 1999 to 2003. By the time that bubble burst and you market to market, it was a $4 trillion loss.
If you actually want to make American business what it should be or what people believe it should be, we need to stop being the highest corporate. We need to stop having the highest corporate tax rate in the world.
That's what Trump wants to get rid of. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. Before we depart too much from the hows of the jobs being moved out of America, we should probably elaborate so that people understand that how this happens is very simple. When the U.S. increases export tax for the U.S. and decreases import tax for other countries importing to our country, the natural solution from a business perspective, especially since most businesses operate on a very tight net profit, is to move those companies out of the country and ship products in, because to them it doesn't matter. Building stuff in America doesn't matter if you're building it at a loss, you know.
That's
And many people don't understand that really that it's a symptom of an illness which has been deliberately contrived. People, the presidents that we've had in power recently have intentionally increased export costs, even to the degree where you could be stuck paying export costs on particular industries where you have no intention or never follow through with exporting any product out of the country. A good example of this is the FFLs. If you design, manufacture, create, sell, disperse, distribute anything that has even the remotest link to a firearm, you're required to pay the export costs for in order to legally maintain that FFL. And this is a really common problem. It's not just within the firearms market, but within many other markets as well.
But there's another blowback part of what you just described, and you're absolutely correct. The other blowback part of that is that the people who want to stay in the United States and they don't want to export to China, or they don't even want to move to China, the U.S. government has turned the United States into a low-wage labor pool.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, they're doing. You ought to see it in Europe. If you were behind the Iron Curtain, Czech, Slovak, Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria, immediately when they decided to, get rid of the Cold War, get rid of the Iron Curtain, the United States, UK, France, Germany went rushing to these people, and the only option they gave them was to be a low-wage labor pool. And I have learned in the last 10 years over here, the people that they offered that to are higher educated and better workers than Germans, better than the Brits, better than the French. But the only opportunity they were given was to be a low-wage labor pool for somebody else.
I think personally, and this is kind of going off of what you said, but I've said this before as well. I think the future of jobs, and you can say in the United States or elsewhere around the world, I think the future of jobs falls within the science, technology, and engineering sectors. Manufacturing is getting replaced by smart robots who you don't have to pay.
Well, you have to pay for the initial cost, then you have to pay for power. But beyond that, you're right. And the robot never has to have a pencil.
Nope. And that's the thing. And if you look at it from a company's perspective, they also don't have to deal with, because a lot of manufacturers use unions. Robots don't have unions. The robots aren't complaining. I think the future of American jobs is in those three fields, or in a very, very specialized technical field.
I would agree with that, and they need to focus on something other than using that high tech for military and offensive weapons.
Yeah,
I think it's too ingrained in our society. It's so ingrained in our society at this point that DARPA feels comfortable declassifying their existing developing projects and putting them out in front of the world. At this stage, I don't know that we'll, at least in the iteration of America that we know, I don't know that we'll ever be able to get away from that. But just as a side note to what was being said about different fields and specializing, the thing is our population is so great that it's not possible to have everybody specializing in 3 fields, much less 10 or 20. And the reality is we overvalue, not that scientists and technology advances aren't important, but we overvalue those things, and we undervalue the skills of manufacture and industry, and that's got to stop as well. And that's a big part of also why people let it happen, is because of this college bandwagon. But I'll tell you what, in 2010, I was going to school to be a CNC machinist, and by the time I was fixing to finish up with my degree in CNC machining, they started hiring people off the street for $11 an hour, and that's at the few companies who are still manufacturing here. And they're hiring guys off the street for $11.50 an hour, no training necessary. You know.
Now we do CNC, we do lathe work. If you're making vacuum systems for nanotechnology, you have to have those skills.
Yep, definitely.
And you have to be extremely precise, like 1/1000th of an inch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But we saw the same trend. We were manufacturing in Canada, and then all of a sudden, China had 90 to 95% of all the high-tech machining that Canada used to do.
Yeah, actually, around the time I was going to school, China actually had a huge advance in their CNC machines.
Yep.
And their machines went from almost from a 1950s accuracy to modern accuracy almost overnight, which is like, so I'm Haas certified. You know what? Are you familiar with the Haas machines? HAAS. Yeah. So I'm Haas certified. Though I don't even work in the industry, because there's no value there. There's just no value to do it. So
you'd be amazed what we do in CNC and lathe work for high precision metal works.
Yep.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of CNC work for automobiles, but those machines are replicated so many times over and over and over again. It wears them out.
Yeah.
We don't have to make 1 million cars. What we have to make is like 100,000 machines is what we do. And then we go to the next generation or the next process design. So, we have to focus in batches. And then we move to the next batch. And if we have to fix the machine and retool, that's just something we have to do.
Yeah, batch work has become the main staple of CNC work at this point.
Yeah. I had a friend, a former business partner. He's an enemy now, but George Hoffmeister, Revstone, that was a big automobile maker, auto components.
Yeah.
He was in Chapter 11 bankruptcy. He got indicted for screwing the pension fund. But, I was looking at possibly buying his company. I sent a team over there, hired a company in Chicago. They went and looked at everything. They called me back after about 6 weeks, and they said every machine he's got is completely worn out. It's dog crap. Don't worry about this company. And so I contacted the bankruptcy trustee, and I said, we're not going to be submitting an offer.
Yep.
Because you've seen those machines. Now how China got what you just described, they had a huge symposium in Shenzhen.
Yep.
And after 3 days, they locked the doors. They went in there and disassembled machines, took photographs, measurements, everything, and then they let everybody, disassemble and go home.
Yep.
there was over 120 WTO lawsuits against China for stealing their technology.
Well, it's always been a problem with China. China's always been very excellent at copying technology, but as far as imagination or raw skill to develop anything of their own, they just have never had it. And they have that same problem with software. They have that problem with automobiles, anything motorized. That's why you see every one of the Honda knockoffs are all Chinese clones. They sell millions of models of small engine knockoffs from Briggs and Stratton, Honda, all the major generators, everything. They just copy technology. That's what they do.
They're even copying the Rolls Royce. God forbid.
Yep.
I find it funny that in China now, GM, as much as they've made some huge errors in business over here, they've gone over to China and made Buick into a brand that would be equivalent to Mercedes.
Yes.
So they've taken a brand that everybody over here, anybody that's, you know, probably my age or within 20 years of it wouldn't probably buy. And now all the Chinese want that car.
Yeah, and they will sell 10 times as many cars in China as they'll sell in America.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And why is that?
It's because the American economy is flat on its ass.
Yep.
And whose fault is that?
The last 4 presidents.
Yep. Pretty much.
Do you think that they all have been into a, I guess you'd say, an American secret to enforce this new world order that we have coming upon us?
Let me tell you how that new world order happened. In September 1991, Russia folded their tent, decided to go be the Russian Federation, and the think tanks and the presidential administration, George Herbert Walker Bush, are sitting there going like, gosh, we don't have an enemy anymore. Who's our enemy? Because they knew they couldn't justify the Congress or the American people spending these, 400, 500, 600 billion a year on defense if there's no enemy. And it was literally in late 1991 is when that John Bolton group that was an adjunct of what I was working on started dreaming up who the new enemy would be. And they finally decided that it was going to have to be Islam, and Dick Cheney even tipped the hand when he made the comment about, we can't help it that God put most of the oil and gas in nations that aren't friendly to America. And they were already working on going after the CIS, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, all the stands. They were going to go after Iran. The big issue in the South China Sea is oil and gas. It's not a U.S. national military interest. The interest is there's a huge motherlode of oil and natural gas there.
Yep. And we all know by common knowledge, if you just research, the Bush family is real big into natural oil and gas. And now the Clintons are into it, and they have been trying to build a pipeline to more or less steal the oil out of Saudi Arabia and the Middle East to get over here into their foundations.
Yep. I mean, it's a vicious circle. But what they were doing, George Herbert Walker Bush launched Desert Storm, and he tried to frame the picture of what a bad guy Saddam was. Of course, that was after we armed Saddam to attack Iran. Mm-hmm. And we did that because Iran kicked us out in 1979. So we lost that oil and gas. And then they went after Iraq. They went after Iraq to go after Iran. And then after that was finished, they were like, well, he needs to go because he's taking his money in euros for his oil. And he's building serious state infrastructure. He's building highways, rails, electric grids, electric generation. We cannot allow this to happen. You know who was saying we cannot allow that to happen? It was Israel. Iraq was never our enemy. Not until they said, oh, we got to get rid of him. I know soldiers, special forces, 2 months before Saddam invaded Kuwait, they were over there shooting at Iraq and Iran, posing as the Kuwait Navy to make that war happen. And to this day, April Glaspie, who was the U.S. ambassador to Iraq at the time, who's actually Canadian, I don't know how in the hell she wound up our ambassador. She lives in the Vancouver area, but she told Saddam that U.S. didn't give a shit about their Arab dispute. Just settle it yourself. He couldn't get them to pay. They had stolen oil from Iraq, so he invaded to collect. And then all of a sudden, you got George Herbert Walker going, Saddam, get out of Kuwait. And he gets the coalition together to go stomp on Iraq. but I know for a fact from U.S. military sources, George Herbert Walker Bush started that war.
Yeah.
That was their launch of the New World Order. After
Yes, it
they
was.
after they won, he actually held a press conference and said, "We can now see coming into view a new world order." And then Clinton kicked his ass out. As
That
soon
is
as
true.
as soon as Clinton got in there, he started trying to co-opt the whole thing. He thought,
I think
oh my God, all my gym buddies could go take all this oil and gas.
I think that's a good place to pause at this moment with this session, and we pick up tomorrow with showing how the New World Order is coming into play and how Clinton, Bush, Bush
I
2, and Obama are all a part of it
I probably
because
won't be able to make it
that is a
tomorrow
whole
because
thing.
I have a test I have to go take.
Oh yeah, well after that, we'll figure out a time and get together. But I mean,
Yeah.
we've got this. Like I said, this is going to be a series of different panels that we do to get this information out because if people don't know, the United States is trying to block Carl from exposing DC secrets. Um, they are doing everything that they possibly can to stop him from telling the truth.
Well,
There's,
it's also what we're going to do next. This is going to be told globally, not on a little chat like this. I'll tell you
yeah,
about that. I'll tell you about that tomorrow. You two smokers have got me going crazy. I have two vices: smoking smoking and golf.
Hey, it's an e-cig.
there we go.
I'm behaving.
Yeah, I
I
Uh,
I had one last question for you, Carl.
go ahead.
Um, with with everything going on right now, and I'm gonna with just the overall social unrest without naming anything in particular, do you think that now is because remember I talked about earlier how when I tell people that I'm a constitutional conservative, at least among a lot of people I know, I get criticized. Do you think that criticism for conservatism overall is going to get worse with the liberal social unrest that we're dealing with today?
No, well, it could. Several possible factors. I think the police are starting to back up a little bit and realize that they have pushed this too far. I've noticed that Black Lives Matter. The more I look at them, the more they look like a terrorist organization to me.
yes, they do.
I
Mm-hmm.
think,
I've equivocated them to the KKK, but
well, yeah, they're kind of like the black KKK. They're like the other side, the other racial side. But I have been telling all my friends, I've probably sent 300 people the link, and I said, if you want to see an amazing discussion between a white man and a black man, I said, watch this. And that was Tommy Sotomayor and David Duke.
Yeah.
That conversation needs
two
to be
people who
held.
you think would stand, two people who you think would stand on opposite sides.
Exactly. And I tell you, that was the best 2 hours time I had spent listening to something in the last 2 years.
Yes,
They
it
act,
was.
they actually covered things that need to be discussed right now in America. So I've been trying to figure out some way. I did contact Tommy and I said, look, I loved that interview. I said, you need to talk to Keith Jackson, former NFL, former Super Bowl champion, 1994 Green Bay tight end. Talk to him because what he did when he retired, he set up a thing in Little Rock, Arkansas called PARK, Positive Attitudes Reach Kids. And what he has done is a fantastic job of getting blacks out of these gangs and making them focus on their future, make them focus on school, learning. He's done a great job. And one of the biggest reasons I wanted out of Arkansas, we had 57 gangs, and we led the nation in murder per capita in 1990 and 91. We didn't want to let our 4 kids out on the street, even during daylight.
Yep.
Hmm.
Well, I think it's a good shot to close off here at the moment. Um, and we pick up with this on our next session,
All
along
right.
with some other topics that I'm making notes of to bring up. And I'm gonna get with David and Chris about doing some promos on different topics and things to bring up to get questions set back, because I want to sit back and do a Q&A and let people come up with their questions that they would like to talk to you about.
Okay.
You mentioned Tommy, and I am in the process of working out a situation of possibly getting in touch with him to get him to join us one night and have a conversation with you also.
Okay.
So,
I share something with Chris today, and we can kind of end it on this. One of the things the United States is terrified of was an interview that I had. This was in 2014 in May, when Russia Hour TV came, and they were going to talk to me for 2 hours and edit it back to an hour. But after it started, it wound up 5.5 hours on and off the record. And
yeah.
what they decided to do, we're going to launch from Switzerland and the Czech Republic a new media show. I'm the anchor of it, 1 hour. And what we do is we just do a screenplay, we show the graphics, and we explain this to the American people until Washington, D.C. chokes on it. That's one of the things. The D.C.'s worried about, because they know if I start talking again, and I start doing the graphics, and I start doing this in video, they have a problem. And I told Chris today on the Skype chat, I said, my analogy is this is like putting the 101st Airborne in the middle of Washington, D.C. between Coke and Source and open fire in both directions.
There we go.
Well, for me personally, I appreciate you doing this, Carl. I think it's stuff people need to know. And I think it's educational to everybody here.
David, I've been working on this ever since my son was born. He's 36 now. I started this in 1980. And in 1982 forward, it has been a war. And it's been a war that nobody's heard about. It's been unpublished.
And with the internet, it's probably only gotten worse.
Yes, it has. You have to be real careful out here with all these keyboard cowards and demtards running around, because you don't know what's coming at you. I guess, Bree, you saw that last night. Guys accusing me of being a Nazi, and my mother can't vote for Trump because she's not American and I'm not American.
Yeah.
Oh, I was looking at that last night too.
Yeah, Cindy lit his ass up.
Yeah, I was about to jump in on that one, but I fell asleep reading it. I was so tired. But we'll get in on that, because you still pay American taxes and you're still registered as a citizen of America, and you will be until you vote for Trump.
I already have my voting form at my house in Switzerland.
Yep.
When you're offshore, whatever nation you're resident in, you vote through that embassy. You fill it in and mail it to them.
Yep. Well, I think as everybody said, this is a good time to at least stop the broadcast. As I said, as everybody said, we'll keep doing this, and I definitely appreciate it. I've actually taken the precaution of, I'm actually going to be taking the precaution of having an actual physical backup on my own computer.
Yeah, okay. I always do as well.
Because with the amount of censoring that the government does, I'm not.
Shit, even YouTube is doing that shit now.
Exactly.
All right, so let me close out. Let me close out real quick. Carl, thank you very much for being on today, guys. There will be many, many more of these videos, hopefully. I'll see you guys soon. Have a good one.
Okay, Bree, one question.